What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated podcast, episode 178 on this Friday, May 30th, 2025. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Friday, 92 days until the season opener, Oklahoma, Illinois State. Exactly 3 months. It's August 30th. Today is May 30th. So you got 3 more months to get the mind right. We're shifting into June this weekend. Big recruiting month. We got a lot to talk about to kind of preview. Obviously, a lot of official visits, Champion Barbecue at the back end of the month in June. So we'll kind of set the scene for the whole month. We got the right guy here to talk about it with, of course, with our guy CK. Also have a new commitment late last week on the defensive line. We'll break that down, and we'll look at some other recruiting stuff as well on the program here today. As again, we ready to shift into June. Camp starting on Sunday. So we got a lot coming up on that side of things. There's been a lot of recruiting content over at Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com throughout the last several weeks, really. But especially, it's kind of, you can see it ramping up. You can see Collin's workload ramping up as more and more stuff, and a lot more to come as we get ready to get into the summer busy months on that side of things. So now's a good time. Sooners Illustrated, Oklahoma247sports.com. But before, Collin, we get into any of the recruiting stuff in the traditional level, at the high school level, very quietly, Oklahoma added a transfer quarterback this week, a name that I'm sure OU fans, or at least in-state fans who keep up with high school football, maybe are at least vaguely aware of. Gavin Frakes comes in from Virginia. If the name sounds familiar, it's because he played his high school football just down the road at Norman North. So he went to New Mexico State, was there for a year, went to Virginia, was there for a year, and now he quietly has been added to Oklahoma's quarterback room. He enrolled at the University of Oklahoma. I believe it was earlier this week. Collin had the report on Sooners Illustrated. CK, just talk a little bit about, the addition for Gavin, why they added, another quarterback. It's just, kind of one of those perfect match sort of things. A guy from the state, from the same town in Norman. I guess just kind of paint the picture of the whole situation here as Oklahoma, again, kind of quietly, there wasn't a lot of hoopla made about it, added another quarterback, to their room there for Ben Arbuckle.
Yeah, I've got a surface level takeaway from this and then a macro level takeaway. And we'll start with the surface level stuff, because just talking about the player, I think that this makes a lot of sense, right? I think that one thing we've learned, especially about Ben Arbuckle coming in and being the offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, he is going to put utmost priority on quarterback depth. He wants a lot of bodies in that room. He wants a lot of capable bodies in that room. And he also wants to play a little bit of chess with the QB situations, because John Mateer, pretty entrenched as the starter. Michael Hawkins is set to be the future. We've talked about this back when Whit Neubauer was added. OU's quarterback room is about as role-specific as you will find in the country. That being said, because of those roles, you need to fill out the rest of the way in order to execute all this stuff properly. And I think that Gavin helps OU do exactly that. What I mean, they want to shelf Jetnu as a young player who needs time to learn and develop. They would like to redshirt Michael Hawkins this year, get him a bonus year of eligibility that he probably should have had the opportunity to earn last year. Just, we know how last year went. And then the number one thing there, too, is they don't want John Mateer playing in games much longer than he has to. And so you go get Whit Neubauer. Now you get a guy like Gavin Frakes. Neubauer and Frakes are essentially going to be the guys that you're probably going to see most often in kind of those, for lack of a better term, garbage time situations. And I know that feels pretty minute in the grand scheme of things, but it's actually really important considering the fact that,
no doubt,
let's say you keep Mateer out there for too long at a time where he doesn't need to be playing, he gets hurt. That's your season, done and gone. And then let's say you throw out Michael Hawkins, one too many games. Well, now you've burned an opportunity at a red shirt yet again. And so Frakes comes in, going to compete with Whit Neubauer as kind of the guy that gets to earn a few snaps in the back end of games. This is someone who played early in his career at New Mexico State, played in, I want to say, 11 contests, did some decent numbers before inevitably losing the starting role to Diego Pavia if that name sounds familiar. And then he went to Virginia, took a little bit of shelf life, and then he gets to come back home to Norman. And so you're excited about adding a guy who this means something to him, right?
Sure.
It's going to be someone you put out there and you feel good about getting the reins together, having control of the situation because they're going to understand the stakes and they'll have family in the stands. It's going to be a home game beyond just the casual setting. And then I think for Frakes, it's a pretty good deal too. Kind of like what I talked about with Neubauer, Josh. Like, hey man, worst comes to worst, you get to hang out in your hometown at the college you probably wanted to go to. Have them take a picture of you in the back end of games, post that stuff on Instagram, then go have some fun after you got a few snaps in. Like,
for sure.
Pretty sweet deal. And if you do want to leverage it, you may get some game film out of the equation to go try and make the most of the rest of your college career. And so Frakes gets a pretty sweet setup. Oklahoma adds quarterback depth that it covets. All in all, it makes a lot of sense for everybody.
Yeah, I actually like Oklahoma's quarterback room. It's a bit of a hodgepodge. It's kind of a thrown together group in some ways, which you make sense when you have a new offensive coordinator coming in. It's not like he's had the time, Ben Arbuckle, to recruit year after year and kind of build it out in his image. But they've made additions that, to your point, make sense for their role. Like, it's very clear what everyone. I don't find there to be any chance for there to be any sort of confusion on what the deal is with every guy. Like, every guy knows where they stand, which I think that there's something to be said for that, right? I mean, John Mateer is clearly your guy. Michael Hawkins is clearly your backup. Gavin Frakes is clearly a depth add. And same for Whit Neubauer. Jet News, the young freshman, he's almost certainly going to redshirt. Like, everyone kind of, I feel like, has a pretty clear idea of like what they're getting out of it this year. And, John Mateer is a guy that, he's been around that long. It's very obvious already what he means to the team. And that he's going to take care of his guys in the QB room and be a good guy to sponge off of if you're still a young player like Frakes. So like you said, for Gavin, went to high school at Norman North, he gets to come back home and be at OU. That's sweet. Even if he's not playing, like you said, just at the end of games, like that's a great deal for him. It's something he'll take with him the rest of his life. He'll have a jersey. You'll have a photo of him in the uni. You can't take that away from him, Nope. And like I said, I kind of like the room. Like, it makes sense, like the pickups they've made. And not for nothing, we're talking about Gavin. Obviously, he's a depth addition. There's no intention for him to start games at OU, obviously. But like, he did play at New Mexico State. And like, he was at Virginia last year. Like, it's not like he can't play. Like, he has ability, right? So I like it. I like it. I like where the QB room is. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, obviously, the full intention is John Mateer and then Michael Hawkins is your backup. After that, it's, we'll see what happens. But, I think the addition makes sense for everyone, kind of like you said. So I like it. If you're an Oklahoma fan, I think you have to like this.
I mean, if you think about it, at the end of the day, 4 members of the quarterback room at Oklahoma now have starting experience at some point in their career.
Yeah, right.
Between Whit Neubauer, who was kind of thrown into the fire as a young player and ended up starting several games for a FCS playoff team. And then Frakes, early in his career at New Mexico State, plays in a number of contests. Obviously, John Mateer and Michael Hawkins, what they have done in their careers. Yes, both maybe a year's worth of starting experience or less, but at the very least, everyone in that group knows what it's like to take meaningful snaps. And then the other part of this too is like, and this is going to sound so big brained, like it's going to be a little bit ridiculous, but like, think about how well run practices are going to be now. Think about that scout team opportunity at Oklahoma. I mean, Frakes is a big dude, 6'4", 220, has a little bit of mobility to him. Whit Neubauer, big, tall passer type, who has a little bit of juice in the run game as well. Like, Oklahoma has 2 guys coming in from the spring window that are really going to help in the preparation phase of team building. And there's a lot of value placed on that as well. And so the last thing I will say, I was thinking about this, Frakes for me, out of nowhere, kind of served as like a perfect reminder of how ridiculous college football is right now. And I know that this is my macro level takeaway, but I mean, I was thinking about this the other day and I thought this is great podcast material. Think about how dumb this sport is right now, in the fact that man, for weeks, months on end, we were in a space where we were operating under the assumption that the 105 rule was going to be put in place. And these teams were going to have to be firmly under 105 spots on the roster.
Right.
And for weeks, we heard coaches, we heard Brent Venables, we heard, I believe I talked about Joel Klanderman at Kansas State. You know, K-State, obviously a program that Brent's very familiar with, a program built on things like walk-ons. We heard so many coaches across the country talk about how the 105 rule was one of the most difficult things that they have had to deal with in a long time, and what it's meant to players and roster retention and things of that nature. And then that just like a judge is like, that's not happening. Or like, we're not going to do this. And then everyone's like, well, what are we doing? Pretty much radio silence as far as the actual number. And now Oklahoma is in a position to be like, well, I guess we can take you, Gavin Frakes. Like, welcome home, I think, unless we get a call from somebody. And it's like, when, I don't know. I was just thinking about this whenever Frakes officially enrolled. Like, how crazy is it that this guy can just now come home, be part of the team, when we thought even a couple weeks ago, like, not even remotely a possibility because of this hard cap that so many teams like Oklahoma had to get under.
No, it's a reminder that, like, there really is no rules. Like, there are rules, but there's not really. And it's kind of one of those things, like, you know, I think back to whenever we were having kind of conversation about spring games and, like, could schools play other schools, and, like, you know, Colorado wanted to play who was it, Nebraska? I can't remember who agreed to, like,
Oklahoma State.
That's right. And it was like the NCAA said, no, they can't do that. But then I think Dion said, like, well, what if we just did it? Like, what would, or maybe Mike Gundy might have even said that. Like, what if
Gundy?
What if we just played it? Like, what would they do? You know, and it was like, that's a phenomenal point. Like, what would they do? It's like the whole thing is kind of, you know, you kind of pair that with SEC spring meetings this week, and, you know, Greg Sankey and talking about the SEC and the playoff expansion. Like, you know, we're in a funny spot right now in the sport, obviously. But as far as Frakes, again, makes sense. And I agree completely. There are no rules, which, whatever. We roll with it. And when the season comes, you enjoy the season. And then in the off season, in the middle of summer, we just talk about how it all makes no sense. Basically, it's kind of where we're at right now. But
there's a picture in my head of the, like, shout out, no free shout outs, as they say. The Little Caesars commercial back in the day where there's no rules and the guy rips his shirt off. It's like, that's Gavin Frakes right now arriving at Oklahoma as like the 109th player on the roster when the 105 rule was supposed to be a thing. Like, he's just showing up back home ready to have a good time. There's no rules. And I'm sure the Oklahoma staff's right there with him at this point.
No doubt. So Oklahoma makes another portal addition there to the QB room with Gavin Frakes. From the portal to the high school recruiting level, they've made another commitment there late last week with Brian Harris, 3-star defensive lineman from Jacksonville, Florida. Always nice to go into SEC country and pull someone. Number 92 defensive lineman in the class, number 74 player in the state of Florida, and our last rankings updated 24/7 Sports. Collin, what do you know about Harris? Obviously, some nice offers. You know, just kind of scanning his profile on 24/7 Sports, things like that. Alabama, I know, in there. Some other SEC teams. You know, honestly, Todd Bates, the defensive line, is in phenomenal shape. We talk about that a lot. They've recruited it well. You know, there's a thought that Oklahoma this upcoming season will have one of the best defensive line, not just in the SEC, but in the country this upcoming year. A big part of that has been Todd Bates continuing to add talent year after year. Does so again here with Harris. I guess your judgment of what kind of a player he is, and I guess the second part, the natural question, is how far away is he from being like a legitimate SEC defensive tackle? I guess, or the other part of the equation there. Kind of give the full eval on Harris.
Yeah, so chooses Oklahoma over Alabama, Penn State, South Carolina, and Michigan. I would say that's
good group. Yeah,
not only a good group, but pretty strong indicator of the player here in Brian Harris. So some background on him. Grows up in a Brazilian household, is of Brazilian descent, and so grew up playing a lot of soccer. This is a
big soccer
I'll just
player.
say Yeah, this is about the second trench guy that Oklahoma has added with a heavy soccer background. Michael Fasusi being the one last year who played a lot of soccer growing up, and why that's notable. Multi-sport background is huge in the evaluation process. It tells you a lot about the player, their athletic capabilities, and you see some of that stuff, the soccer background carrying over to Brian Harris on tape. I think this is someone who fits Oklahoma from a personality and mentality perspective in a lot of ways. He is someone who tore his ACL very early on in his young high school career and kind of embraced that adversity head on, really attacked the rehab process, bounced back from that to go on a breakout season of sorts in 2024, had 29 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles in 10 games. Also went on to win the defensive line MVP of the Under Armour Next Camp in Orlando, which is usually one of the more talent-laden exhibitions in the Under Armour Next series. And that's a camp that we at 24/7 Sports value very highly. And anyone who watched his commitment announcement, I was at a wedding, so the great Brian Doan was gracious enough to cover for me when Harris popped. But anyone who was able to watch him and see him kind of interact, speak, very outgoing, personable individual who, again, just kind of has that OU DNA tab, for lack of a better term, on him. And guy that you feel like is going to help you peer recruit at a pretty high level, especially in the Southeast, where every advantage you can get is a valuable one. Now, as far as the individual from an on-field perspective, I know that a lot of the public sphere has made a lot of him being listed at 6'4", 290 pounds. You got to do your homework in the scouting and evaluation stuff. I can tell you that he's been verified at a shade under 6'3". I would probably tell you it's more like 6'2 3/4, 6'3 flat on a good day right now. But honestly, like, that's okay, because interior defensive linemen, specifically for me, I kind of like guys that are a little bit lower to the ground. They can gain leverage naturally. Dominic Williams is a great example of this. Not the tallest interior defensive lineman, but because he's built like a fire hydrant, he can win under the shoulder pads of offensive linemen and get that ground very quickly. And I think that Brian Harris is someone who, as he adjusts pad level, things of that nature, he's going to be someone who can win underneath very easily. Kind of a one-speed player right now, if I'm honest. I think that there is some development to do in terms of the gear shifting on the inside, but has a little bit of quickness to him. I think that this is a player who plays with a high motor, can flash one-gapping, three-tech penetration style upside in his game, and that fits right into, obviously, what Oklahoma does with that three-tech in their four-down front. Now, the other part of this, too, that I think will ultimately determine what Brian Harris can bring to the table is, as he develops, he plays a lot of defensive end in high school, Josh. We know that Oklahoma specifically will go to that odd front, that three-down front against pass-heavy squads, which means sometimes those defensive tackles, especially the three-tech types, will kick out to end. If he can do that, then we're really talking about Brian Harris being someone who can contribute at a high level in this defensive line rotation for years to come. And so I think that this is just someone who fits what Oklahoma is looking for. They have prioritized the Southeast greater and greater, especially for defensive line talent over the years, and Brian Harris fits right into that. And I think that this is a player who, give him a couple of years to get bigger, stronger. I think the play strength is going to be big because he's got to get a little bit better against the run, taking on multiple blockers. But as long as he gets bigger, stronger, and a little bit more cleaned up, like, this is someone who could create some havoc on the inside, and that's exactly what Oklahoma is looking for in this attacking style defense.
Yeah, kind of scanning, like you said, Brian Doan had the story on 24/7 Sports, Students Illustrated, kind of scanning his story, reading it and getting some of the quotes from Harris. We say that or at least I say this all the time with it seems like everyone they add, but again, feels like a Brent Venables guy. Just kind of reading, this quote in particular stuck out to me. Brian said, Coach Venables has had such a huge impact in my life just off the coaching he's already given me without even being my coach. Says a lot to me. His personality is infectious. I feel like there are probably players that Brent Venables is not like their type of coach, right? I mean, he's, very relational. He'll definitely chew you out. We've seen that. Like, you got to have the right kind of personality to, I think, jive with Brent Venables, and he will sniff you out if he feels like you're not like a hard worker, like he doesn't want anything to do with you. Um, and so whenever these things, it just kind of feels like he has done a really good job, Brent Venables, since he's been here, both Portland and high school. There's been a couple misses, but for the most part, a very high hit rate of like the right personalities. And it feels like Brian is one that fits right into that mold again. And, I'm really interested in where he kind of fits in, because the defensive line is in phenomenal shape this year, obviously. But you assume after this year, Grayson Alton will be gone. Dominic Williams will be gone. You're still going to have David Stone and Jaden Jackson again. They aren't draft eligible just yet. But, you have Trent Wilson, who's a true freshman, is the only one you signed this past cycle. So it's like there's kind of a path for Harris to kind of get into the mix pretty quickly, it would seem, if he can handle it. So, we'll see. It's exciting, what they've done. We did the show a few weeks ago where they hadn't had a commit in forever. And since then, they've added 3 guys on defense with Harris, Nico Jandro, and then, of course, Ja'Cory Smith. And it's like, it's still really early. They have 7 commits, and we've talked about it before. 2 of them are a little wobbly. But that defensive group, and it's still early, it's, we're about to enter June. It feels like it's kind of forming nicely with the guys they've added here in the last, few weeks with Smith, Jandro, and now Harris. So reason to be, I think, a little excited, a little optimistic about kind of the direction of that side of the ball. I mean, the defense is, there's little reason right now to think the defense is going to continue to churn out good players and be in good shape for year after year after year right now with this staff, because it's just what they've done. So a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, it feels like a Todd Bates guy too.
For sure.
That personality, definitely a Todd Bates guy. This is the kind of defensive tackle that Todd Bates turns into a menace in years to come. And that's kind of what I thought too, to have guys like Brian Harris and Trent Wilson in the crock pot a little bit, let those guys build up under Bates. They have time on their side with the amount of talent stockpiled at the defensive tackle spot. I think you have to be really excited about what the future looks like for Harris and the defensive tackle room with him now a part of it. And I also think you have to be ecstatic because you get a Southeast defensive tackle with upside in the boat, and it allows you to go into the summer big game hunting, knowing you've got at least one defensive tackle you really like in the boat. Because, I mean, Oklahoma is going to go after Taj Overton in State, a highly ranked defensive tackle who is fielding a who's who recruitment right now. And then Valdon Sound, one of the truly nation's best defensive tackle recruits. Oklahoma's in there very much towards the top, along with Florida, Nebraska, and a couple of others. And so you always want to have at least a baseline in defensive tackle recruiting, someone that you can kind of rely on to ensure that we're at least filling out the room with the right guys, and Harris gives Todd Bates exactly that.
No doubt. Looking at some other stuff, we mentioned June about to start. Sunday is June 1st. That's actually OU's first camp on Sunday. Collin will be there. I might be there. We'll see what's going on with some other, Diamond Sports and things like that. But Collin will be there certainly on Sunday, the first of 4 high school camps in the month of June for Oklahoma. Obviously, June's a very big month on the recruiting side. You have official visits. Obviously, Bowe Bentley's visit coming up. We're going to talk about him specifically in just a little bit. Obviously, Champion Barbecue coming up in the back end of June. So, Collin, I'll just kind of open it this way. I mean, just your expectations for June. Like what, or even better than expectations, I mean, certainly expectations, but also just kind of what fans should be looking for in the month of June. Because it's a big month. It always has been. Some big official visit weekends are lined up coming up here, as soon as next weekend, obviously. And like I said, camps are starting and everything else. For the month of June, what is kind of, the headlines, the storylines, the things you're watching for, however you want to take it, for what is obviously it always has been and looks to be again a month where it's going to ramp up and get kind of hectic on the recruiting side for Oklahoma.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me is I know that several fans out there are off the heels of May, where Oklahoma rips off 3 commitments,
Sure,
almost out of nowhere to a degree, not a lot of visits going on or anything else. And so a lot of fans are like, okay, so that means, we're going to get 6, 10, 12 commits in the month of June. I would caution fans about that. And more than anything, it's just kind of the logistical nature of recruiting right now. And what I mean by that is SEC meetings have been going on and a lot of coaches are talking. Kirby Smart, certainly part of the equation. We know that Kirby has, in a sense, tried to take over Nick Saban's chair as like a voice of the sport.
yeah.
And one thing that Kirby Smart brought up that I don't think is getting talked about enough, that Oklahoma fans specifically should really pay attention to, is the financial layer to recruiting. And something that Kirby talked about is that there have been commitments early in the 2026 cycle that have happened kind of out of nowhere. And this is in reference to Oklahoma. This is more in reference to some of the commits you saw really early in the class that caught a lot of people by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
And Kirby was basically like, look, something that every program in America is dealing with right now is that not only are some agents for these recruits, because that's a thing now, asking for money to commit or stipends or whatever to commit. Yeah. There are schools out there that are giving these players exactly that. And we're not talking about McDonald's bags either. I mean, we're talking, I believe the exact number that Kirby was quoted on saying was $20,000 a month. Now, I would do a lot of stuff for $20,000, but you're going to have to give it to me first, right?
Yeah.
And that's the key here as we enter the month of June is what I want Oklahoma fans to know, and I really any college football fan that happens upon this podcast is like, just because you don't see a lot of actual commitments happen in the month of June, which is certainly in play, doesn't mean there isn't recruiting momentum or whatever being garnered.
Sure.
The thing that a lot of people are talking about behind the scenes right now is like these official visits are more so going to be negotiations than commitments. I mean, these guys are going to go through a legitimate process of, okay, we're going to go to this campus. We're going to look around and all that, but we're going to see everything that they have to offer. And then if you really think about the negotiation process, these guys, their camps, they're going to go from one campus to the other. They're going to compare notes. They're going to compare offers. They're going to see what they can get out of each stop. And then they're going to compare all of these packages together and come to a decision. That's not widespread, but it is largely going to be the case for a number of recruits, especially those at the highest level. And so the first storyline I would discuss is, again, the very much new business style approach to the recruiting process by these recruits and those around them, and how that's inevitably going to affect these programs who are trying to add to the class. Mm-hmm. So I'm not necessarily saying that you're not getting any commits in the month of June, but let's say June 6th rolls around and Oklahoma has 20 guys on campus and they don't get any commitments. That's okay. Why? Because all those kids went to Oklahoma, had a great time, and they got their offer. And it's really going to be over the next few months about what they end up finding to be the best offer for them. And that takes time. That is a process, and it all has to happen through official visit season.
Yeah, it's almost feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it feels like just following recruiting and you cover it on a day-to-day and you do an excellent job. For someone like myself or a fan, just kind of keeping up with it, we almost have to reset our mind in terms of like the calendar. Because obviously we talked about it a few times. Like this cycle, they have 7 commits right now, and we talked about it before. A couple of them, Jaden O'Neal and Odom, are a little, they're committed, but it's a little, they're taking visits other places. It seems like it's a little shaky right now at best. Like, is this going to be the norm? Are we going to get to June every year and it's only going to be a handful of guys, right? I mean, because we talked about it, even last year or the year before, when we first started doing this here at Sooners Illustrated, like when we got to camp season, we had a lot of commits and they would come out to camp and we'd see them. And it was now this year, it's like, we only have 7 guys committed. Like, how many can we expect to see on a week in, week out basis? So it's like the whole kind of process of it has shifted. I'm also curious too, because, last year they signed a smaller class. We talked about it, on signing day and throughout. And Brent Venables talked about why the numbers were a little bit lower. Again, you only have 7 guys right now. It's about to be June. Are you expecting this class to also be on the smaller side? And like, is it going to be like a 15 guys, like more? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, it's all changing. And so it's like, I almost don't know what to really expect. I think fans probably feel the same way. Like, what is reasonable in this, kind of new era with all the portal guys you're adding and NIL and everything else? Like, kind of what we know it as is like, I guess how much is the same and how much is different. It's like hard to know, you know what I mean? Like it feels very different this cycle than the last couple, even that we've talked about here on this show. It's just, it's strange. Yeah.
It's also like, I know that some Oklahoma fans out there might go, well, look, 7 commits, no matter how the cycle goes, that's still an alarming number for this time of the year. Folks, look at the rest of the SEC. Programs with just 8 commits to this point: Tennessee, Texas, and Ole Miss. Programs with 7 commits: Auburn, Oklahoma. Alabama has just 5. Florida has 2. I mean,
wow.
It's happening to everybody. And like, yeah, A&M has 11, but like LSU only has 9, which that's only 2 more than Oklahoma has currently. So this is a widespread thing that everyone's trying to navigate. Arkansas is up to 15 commits. That's kind of to be expected with the way that state operates with the state of Arkansas, right? Like, almost all those in-state guys, except for now Ja'Cory Smith, Marion Robinson, Marcus Wimberly. Arkansas is going to be able to rip off a few early pledges. But especially in the case of Oklahoma and some of these other SEC programs, as you can see, like I just mentioned, so many other programs in the SEC specifically are only around 8 to 5 pledges. And like Florida's at 2. So the pace, we're in a new pace in recruiting, and it's again, not only happening now, but I'm telling you, it's going to be something that we all navigate into the future. Other stuff beyond that, though, what to expect?
Sure.
I think that you got to kind of start with the commits, the current commits. We're really going to figure out what's happening. I just put together a little story on Daniel Odom before we hopped on. He's taking his first official visit this weekend to Washington. It sounds like UW is a serious threat. Florida State's anxiously awaiting Odom's arrival the following week.
Yeah.
Jaden O'Neal is going to be at Arizona this weekend. That Florida State official visit is on the horizon. Will Conroy, North Carolina has been mentioned a time or two. We'll see what happens there. So, yeah, like I think you kind of start with the commitments. Like, hey, this second recruitment stuff legitimate for them as well.
Yeah.
And then I think obviously for me, the June 6th weekend is really going to be interesting to see how Oklahoma approaches that stuff. The Champ U barbecue is arguably going to define a lot of recruitments. But then I think you're starting to see Oklahoma fill out that June 13th weekend a little bit now that Bowe Bentley, who we're getting ready to talk about, will be there on June 6th.
Yeah.
They're adding DeSevin Walker, the running back, who I'll write about a little bit today. They're adding Tyler Ruxer, the tight end recruit that they're pursuing. And he just scheduled his commitment date for July 5th this morning. So not only how they navigate the OV weekends, but hey, man, like now it's time to start, like, Who are they going to add along the defensive and offensive lines? Like, who makes the most sense? How does the quarterback situation play out? Wide receiver is fascinating to me going into OV season.
Yeah.
Corner. You could tell me that Oklahoma gets 3 corners or no corners in 2026, and I would believe you right now. So there's a laundry list of stuff, but those are some overarching themes going into OV season and how it impacts Oklahoma.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Some of these big weekends, I feel like we've been circling for a long time. Next weekend in particular, of course, Campy Barbecue for later in the month. We'll get to that when we get there. But it just kind of feels like some of these storylines that we've been talking about for a while are going to kind of come to a boiling point, right, in the month of June. So it's exciting. It's a busy month. And also, we're talking about Bowe Bentley more in just a second. But obviously, the quarterback stuff feels like probably right by the end of June, we're going to have a resolution there. So that's certainly, that's been the storyline of 2026 recruiting for Oklahoma. So the fact that we probably get an answer to how that's all going to shake out is, really interesting. It comes up all the time, even with me. And I don't even really, cover recruiting on a day-to-day, certainly like anywhere near like what Collin does. And people ask me, what's going on? Jaden Bowe Bentley, how's that going? And it's like, it's people are aware of it. OU fans are very aware of it. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out as well. And like I say, camp's coming up on Sunday. First one, Collin will be there. I might be there, but Collin certainly will be. Another one next week, and then a couple more the week after that. So lots of visits going on. Guys are camping. A lot going on in June. And then also there's the other mega camps that Collin will also get out to at other schools, I'm sure. And so we have a lot coming your way. It's a busy time. That's why I said subscribe, Students Illustrated. Great time for it. Oklahoma247sports.com. All our national recruiting guys doing a phenomenal job as well. Like we got you absolutely. There is no better recruiting coverage that the 247 Sports Network. It's phenomenal. So great time to jump aboard and make sure you keep up with all of it over what's going to be a very busy summer. Collin, if you're ready, we can shift to Bowe Bentley. Are you ready? Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
Bowe Bentley, update time. We're getting to the meat and potatoes of the Bowe Bentley sweepstakes here. Going to LSU this weekend. Obviously, it's LSU and Oklahoma. That's what it's down to. He's going to Baton Rouge as we speak this weekend. He'll be in Norman next weekend. Remember, we talked about it. He shifted around his schedule. Originally, it was supposed to be the other way. He's going to come to Oklahoma in the middle of June and then go to Baton Rouge after. He's going to LSU this weekend now, and he'll be in Norman next weekend. So obviously we'll have a lot more to talk about even next week and then the week after. It'll be a weekly update with Bowe, I think, until he makes a decision probably. But for you, Collin, going to LSU this weekend, I guess the natural, obvious question that an OU fan would want me to ask you is concern level for Oklahoma that LSU will get this done this weekend. Is that a possibility for you? Not likely. Does he make Norman either way? I guess kind of size up all of it as he goes to LSU this weekend for these 2 visits that are going to feel like decide this thing.
Yeah, so it really begins.
Yeah.
I've contended for a while. Yeah, I've contended for a while that everything that we talk about with Bowe Bentley really doesn't mean anything until the 2-week stretch we're about to go into starts, and it gets going this weekend. Right. LSU probably holds the lead going in. I'm going to be honest. And now, again, do I think that carries a ton of weight right now, especially considering he has to actually take the OV to LSU, and that could be, it could be further even more.
Mm-hmm.
This is all grain of salt stuff right now, but look, this is where we really decide this thing. And I think LSU is going to be prepared to blow them away. This is going to be LSU's one shining moment, if you will, to go get their guy. Now
they have a ton of momentum right now. We've talked about that before. LSU has had, they got
winners of the offseason. Yeah, winners of the offseason right now. They have been incredible on the talent acquisition front over the last few months since the season ended, and Bowe Bentley is certainly part of that. Now, there's not much to say about the LSU official visit if you're Oklahoma. If you're Oklahoma, what you're doing right now is you're hoping he makes it to Norman, which I probably the best way to say it would be I would be shocked if he didn't, just because of the nature of this thing. And then if you're Oklahoma, you're strategizing, okay, he's no longer the only guy on campus. How are we going to spend time with him? What's our approach here? What are we going to do with the pitch? But also, I think if you're Oklahoma, you're waiting word on what came out of that LSU official visit. And if you're Oklahoma, you got to be prepared for, let's not be naive, any negative recruiting that's done. You got to be prepared for whatever pitch is put together. And you've really got to be ready to sell quarterback development at Oklahoma. And with a offensive coordinator in Ben Arbuckle, who's been around guys like Mateer and Cam Ward. Now, Mateer is going to help. I think that's a big thing. I know Mateer and Bowe Bentley have a good relationship. I couldn't tell you about the role that Garrett Nussmeier plays in all of this, but that's a layer as well.
Sure.
And then I think if you're Oklahoma, like, you've got to try and find a way to appropriately put it to Bowe Bentley, like that he would legitimately have the chance to be the future at Oklahoma, because something that we're talking about a lot right now on the recruiting front is like, okay, LSU needs to go find a quarterback that gives them a competitive floor in that room, because 2027, they have a chance to legitimately go find an incredible ceiling with their pick of the litter of, I've mentioned it here on the show before, but like the state of Louisiana in 2027 has one of the best quarterback classes it has ever seen, between Elijah Haven, who was our number one player in the country in 27, Malachi Ziegler, Peyton Houston, and then Garrett Nussmeier's younger brother, Colton Nussmeier, who's down the street from me here in the DFW Metroplex. Colton Nussmeier is getting ready to play his college ball in the 27 cycle as well, and LSU's in the mix for him too. So LSU needs somebody in 2026 to give them that peace of mind. Like, we've got a really good player who can compete with whoever we bring in 2027. If you're Oklahoma, you have to sell to Bowe Bentley, you're our guy. You're going to be our guy, especially because obviously you're not looking at 2027 the way that LSU is. If you're Oklahoma, you're also looking at this through the lens of, like, this is an OU fan. This is a kid that grew up an OU guy that is still a little bit miffed about the fact that Oklahoma not only took so long to offer him, but still has a quarterback committed in the class. But like, everything about Oklahoma's pitch out of this LSU weekend has to be hammering home to him that he is their guy. And obviously LSU is going to be doing a lot of the same, but we're going to see here pretty soon what comes from that and how Oklahoma has to counter. Now, what I think helps you in reference to the LSU visit this weekend is Jaden O'Neal going to Arizona this weekend. Obviously, I'm not sitting here trying to tell you that Arizona is a legitimate threat for Jaden O'Neal right now. Could be the case. Sure. I still feel it's Florida State or Auburn until proven otherwise. But Oklahoma at least can go, hey, like, while you were at LSU, look, the guy that's committed to us right now is going through his process. You're our guy that we're trying to pursue first and foremost, and that's going to be backed by evidence now going to this weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see what the buzz is over the next few days. Again, I think LSU is very optimistic about it standing going to the weekend, and they have a real chance to further it. This race was never going to be really determined until we got into this 2-week stretch, but it really kind of feels like we're getting, quote unquote, the final say this weekend, because if LSU gains enough ground, it could either be too much for Oklahoma to overcome, or on the flip side, leaves that window open, that door of opportunity, if you will, for Oklahoma. And we're going to figure out whether or not that's the case over the next few days.
Yeah, it's, that's the question, right? That's, can LSU create enough of a lead that there's nothing Oklahoma can do about it? It's just, it feels like swinging Bentley is pivotal for Oklahoma in this 26 class. We talk about it all the time. You kind of get the quarterback and you kind of build out from there in your recruiting cycles. And if you don't get Bowe, and assuming O'Neal also leaves, it's like where does that leave you? We've talked about that a few times. Yeah, it's fascinating. It feels like a must-have, and it's hard because you're having to sell him on a lot more of potential than anything proven. I mean, Ben Arbuckle just got to Oklahoma. Oh, you just had a horrible year and a miserable year offensively, obviously. And you have John Mateer who had great success at Washington State, but he hasn't done it at the SEC yet. It's like if you're Ben Arbuckle and you had Cam Ward, you just got number one. So I guess you have that feather in your cap, but it's a lot more kind of the possibilities rather than hard. This is what we've done here, right? So it's a slippery spot for Oklahoma. It's a huge 2 weeks. We've talked about it, like what happens if they don't get him and O'Neal leaves. That's something that Oklahoma doesn't want to have to deal with or worry about. And we'll see. It's a big weekend in Baton Rouge, and also had a huge weekend when he comes here. It's going to be fascinating to keep up with. It has been, throughout this entire process, and it will be again, certainly over the next couple of weeks as we kind of start to get close to, figuring this out a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think if you're Oklahoma, this is a place that he wanted to play, right? You talked about that before, that it was his dream spot, all that good stuff. If you can sell him on as like, dude, you're the future of this thing, maybe that's enough. Maybe it's not, depending on how the rest of it goes. It's really, really interesting and gonna be fun to keep up with, and will either be a huge win or a gut punch, I think, for Oklahoma in this 26 cycle. So we'll see what happens, but it's exciting to say the least, and Collin have the updates as we go along. Like you said, very interested to see what the buzz is coming out of Baton Rouge after this weekend. Because you got to imagine it's going to go great, right? Obviously, it's going to go well. But does it go so well that it's like it's feeling real strong, or is there still some wiggle room there? That's going to be the question going into next weekend when he comes here. We shall see. I think that's it. A lot of stuff over at Sooners Illustrated right now, like I said, and a lot more to come. June coming up, camp starting, lots of visits coming up. Bowe Bentley's in Baton Rouge this weekend. We got a lot going on, a lot to talk about. We'll be back next week. Collin, we might, it's going to be a little bit of a moving target on the shows next few weeks because of the camps and stuff. So we might be with you next Friday. We could even maybe go early on Wednesday. We're kind of have to figure it out as we go. So kind of bear with us as we shift around between Diamond Sports postseason, recruiting camps, just others. Collin's out on the road all the time. It's a little bit kind of hectic moving stuff around in June, but we'll have our regular 2 shows a week for the most part, I would imagine, throughout June. And we'll talk a lot of recruiting stuff because there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about over the next several weeks as we get into the summer. I think that's it. CK, appreciate you as always. What do you got going on this weekend? You going out somewhere this weekend? I can't remember. I thought you said, did you say that?
I am going to an offensive line camp on Saturday and
there you go.
Driving up to Norman.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. Up in our neck of the woods. Yeah.
I'll watch some big boys down here in DFW do some work. And then once the wife gets home from book club, we're heading to your neck of the woods and
heck yeah,
getting ready for camp season, man.
Welcome back. You're coming at it, we were talking on the phone about how the camps last year were all just blazing hot. And it's actually quite pleasant in Oklahoma City right now. I think it's going to stay that way for a little while. So you might get kind of lucky, relatively speaking.
I've already kind of in my head put myself down for a Midway daily lunch. And
that's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's too nice of weather. You got to sit outside at Midway.
100%.
And then Carly is obsessed with Volare. So we are
not a bad place to be obsessed with.
We're hitting the rooftop Sunday evening. That's happening. So
no doubt.
It's going to be fun being back in Norman, not only this Sunday, but the next few weeks. And then, I'll be at TCU and SMU mega camps, UNT 4 or 5 times. We're going to have a lot of stuff going on. And then OVs, man, it's crazy that we're gearing up,
Absolutely. It's going to be a fun month, busy month. Then it'll be July. You got media days and fall camps right around the corner. It's ramping up. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. Like I said, 3 months from today, the season opener. We got some kickoff times yesterday. Illinois State, 5 p.m. Kind of gross. We live with it. I wasn't a huge fan of that. But Michigan under the lights, I like that. That's nice. 6:30 kick in week 2, but
yeah, I may have to venture up for that one. I saw the night
road.
kick, Michigan. You look at that schedule that week, and you're like, dude, it's the talk of the town in college football. I might have to venture my way up.
Yeah, it's gonna be a scene. I think for that game, that's gonna have a great atmosphere. But the first game, the Illinois State, it's just early enough that it'll still be really hot the whole game, but not like late enough that you still get like the day. 5 p.m. is gross. Dude, who scheduled 5 p.m.? What is that?
Our young intern Blake Ankoviak, his longtime request has been to get a credential for the Illinois State game because he has a friend on the team apparently.
Oh,
and
nice.
I was like, yeah, dude, like we'll get you in for the Illinois State game. It's not going to be a problem. And then they dropped the 5 p.m. kick, and I was like, the young man is going to be baptized by fire, quite literally. 5 p.m. August 30th in Norman.
That like hour leading up till kick, like 4 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Sweat equity.
Steamy. Bring the sunscreen. Can't wait for it, but man, that unkind. It's gonna be sweaty out there. It's gonna be sweaty, but that's how it goes. Season opener, it's kind of how it always goes. I think that's it for now. Be back on Monday. Barring softball schedule, might have to wait till Tuesday. Like I said, it's kind of a moving target right now with the way the shows shake out. If you missed softball stuff yesterday, it's all there on the YouTube channel as well as the website. James and I did a quick little instant reaction after the game yesterday. We'll probably do more of that as we go along through the WCWS. Baseball regional start today, so look out for a lot of coverage about that as well. A lot going on. It's a busy time as we shift into June. For Collin Kennedy, I'm Josh Callaway. Signing out for now. We'll see you next time back here early next week on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.